provided by Thomas Allgaier and Frennis, based on the most relevant LinkedIn posts about autonomous and mobility markets in calendar weeks 33 and 34. Frennis supports Tier 1 automotive suppliers with early-stage market validation for their R&D efforts by combining secondary research, direct OEM expert interviews, and facilitated customer meetings. You can find more info in the description.
Imagine a prankster shutting down an entire city block using 50 empty robotaxis as a coordinated physical DDoS attack.
Wow.
Right. And that is not a scene from some cyberpunk novel. That actually happened in San Francisco just this week.
That is wild.
Yeah. So today we're looking at the top autonomous and mobility markets trends across LinkedIn and really unpacking what these raw, real-world deployments are, telling us about the future of how we actually move.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for today's deep dive is to analyze 4 major industry shifts. So first, we're looking at the brutal operational reality as robotaxis transition from these, cute pilot programs into actual paid commercial services. Second, we'll examine the global regulatory chess game that's kind of shaping where this tech actually deploys. Third, we need to dig into the unit economics and the street-level friction of micromobility.
Right, the scooters and bikes.
Exactly. And finally, we'll look at how human-centric design is finally replacing a century of driver-first vehicle architecture.
Yeah, and the timing here is it's critical. The industry is currently crossing this commercial threshold, and as it does, the whole nature of the competition is fundamentally shifting. I mean, the war is no longer about who can build the most advanced self-driving car in a vacuum.
Right.
It's a war to own the overarching mobility network itself.
Yeah, and Samarth Bali actually laid out a really good framework for this transition on LinkedIn. He pointed out that the robotaxi war has fractured into 3 distinct strategic pillars, basically.
All right, yeah.
So you have Waymo, whose primary goal is to own the intelligence, like the autonomous driver itself.
Right, the brain.
Exactly. And they are already executing roughly 500,000 weekly paid rides, which is huge.
Yeah, massive.
Then you have Zoox, and they're betting heavily on owning the machine by building this bespoke ground-up robot. And finally, you have Uber, whose entire play is about owning the network and that customer relationship.
I'd actually take that analysis a step further, because if you look at the long-term unit economics, the autonomous vehicle hardware will likely become commoditized over the next decade.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the real scarcity in the mobility market, it won't be the vehicles. It'll be the consumer demand and the routing efficiency.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Uber's bet is that passengers, they won't want to open 5 different apps to find a Waymo or a Zoox or whatever. They'll just open the dominant aggregator app, hit ride, and the dispatch AI will just deploy whatever vehicle makes the most economic sense for that specific route.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, they just want to be the operational layer for all physical mobility.
That makes the hardware strategy incredibly high stakes then, especially for a company like Zoox. Because according to some recent updates from Edward Ludlow and Ming Ma, Zoox is officially launching paid commercial services in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow. Vegas, okay.
Yeah, but the critical detail here is that they received the very first NHTSA commercial exemption for a purpose-built vehicle lacking a steering wheel or pedals.
No steering wheel at all.
Nothing. I mean, it's like the industry is finally moving from the science fair project phase into running a real commercial airline.
It is a massive architectural leap. Because when you physically remove the steering wheel, you're eliminating the fallback mechanism entirely.
Right.
Like, the software can never hand control back to a human in the cabin.
Because there's no way for them to take over.
Exactly. So that means the entire system architecture, like from the brake-by-wire redundancy to the localized power nets, all of it has to be completely self-reliant from start to finish.
But, I mean, let me push back on that operational readiness a little bit.
Yeah.
Are these fleets genuinely prepared for the wild unpredictability of the real world?
Wow.
Because the moment you push them into these edge cases, the limitations of current machine learning models become pretty glaringly obvious. Ben Hubbard highlighted a perfect example of this.
Oh, the recall.
Yes. Waymo just had to recall nearly 4,000 vehicles. And why? Because their multi-million-dollar sensor suites were driving straight into flooded roadways, like a hazard that a teenager with a fresh license knows to avoid.
Yeah, it really highlights a massive gap in sensor fusion versus semantic understanding.
What do you mean?
So a human driver implicitly understands the context of a flooded curb, right? They see the water rippling, they see the cars ahead diverting, and they just apply the heuristic, turn around, don't drown.
Right, exactly.
But the autonomous system's lidar, it simply registers the surface of the water, and the neural net, despite all its massive training data, it just failed to assign a negative weight to that standing water. So it just proceeded blindly right into the hazard.
That's crazy. And I saw another edge case that perfectly illustrates this gap from Steven Snyder. A robotaxi in Las Vegas drove directly into an active fire scene.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because the perception stack didn't properly classify the smoke. So it just braked hard and immobilized itself right in the middle of the emergency zone.
Wow.
And the critical failure wasn't just the sensors missing the smoke. It was the complete lack of an operational protocol. Like a remote operator had to literally connect and back the car out of the scene. First responders need to know how to stop an empty vehicle and, who to call.
See, from a municipal perspective, that is an unacceptable operational bottleneck.
Oh, totally.
I mean, if you're a fire captain arriving at a chaotic, multi-alarm fire, you do not have the time to figure out how to stop an empty 2-ton vehicle.
No.
Or to hunt down some 1-800 number for fleet dispatch.
Exactly.
Snyder's point is that the industry is so hyper-focused on the vehicle's perception software, but they're lagging years behind on the emergency HMI, the human-machine interface for the actual first responders.
Which brings us back to that physical DDoS attack you mentioned at the top of the deep dive.
Right, yeah.
Dan Lorman shared that a prankster in San Francisco managed to order 50 Waymos onto the exact same dead-end street.
It's just wild to think about.
It really is. It created this massive pileup and forced the company to just disable rides in the area until the next morning. I mean, how does a multi-billion-dollar routing AI allow that to even happen?
Well, the system failed because the dispatch AI likely relies on localized density metrics that were just easily spoofed.
Okay.
So the bad actor generated simultaneous, highly clustered ride requests, and that just overwhelmed the fleet's multi-agent load balancing protocol.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, it completely exposed the vulnerabilities in how these centralized fleets authenticate and manage coordinated routing demands.
So with fleets routinely driving into floods, getting stuck at fire scenes, and being clustered by pranksters, how many humans are actually sitting behind monitors bailing these algorithms out right now?
Well, the ratio is actually much better than the headlines suggest, but the workflow is what really matters here. Daniel Ebre-Marquez shared that a healthy remote assistance ratio today is actually between 1 to 20 and 1 to 50.
Wait, really? How is one person managing 50 autonomous vehicles? What happens when a storm hits and 10 cars encounter a flooded road at the exact same time?
So what's fascinating here is it's crucial to understand that remote operators are not driving the cars with the joystick.
Okay.
It functions much more like an IT help desk ticket system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the onboard compute handles all the continuous real-time driving. However, if the vehicle's trajectory confidence level drops below a safety threshold, say, it encounters a complex instruction zone it just can't map.
Right.
It pauses safely and generates a task. A remote human looks at the telemetry for that one specific vehicle for that moment only, draws a legal bounding box or path around the obstacle, closes the ticket, and disconnects.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the 1 to 50 ratio is really a testament to how infrequently the operational design domain is actually breached.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The human is providing localized logic, not localized control.
Exactly.
But because these localized logic failures have real-world consequences on city streets, we're seeing a massive shift in how different global regions regulate deployment, right? Like operational friction is naturally mapping to regulatory friction.
Oh, absolutely. Which is why the rollout in Europe looks nothing like the initial ride-hailing boom a decade ago.
Right, the whole move fast and break things era.
Exactly. Timothy Papandrea noted that Waymo is executing a highly structured, almost diplomatic European entity strategy. They aren't just dropping cars on streets. They're setting up R&D centers in Switzerland. They're integrating deeply with German manufacturing and homologation standards. And they're heavily navigating EU policy in Brussels well before launch.
Yeah, I mean, they have to play that game, considering Europe's regulatory framework really prioritizes those structured safety cases over moving fast. But while Waymo plays the long game in Europe, there's a fascinating supply chain dynamic playing out on U.S. soil.
Oh yeah, the Zeekr imports.
Yes, Dr. Volker Kais and Ken Kwong pointed out that Waymo is currently importing thousands of Chinese-built Zeekr EVs for its U.S. robotaxi fleet.
Yeah, and the economics of that decision are just staggering. Waymo has shipped over 3,200 of these stripped Zeekr gliders, so no sensors or software, through the port of Long Beach.
Right.
But because they are Chinese-built, they are subject to a massive 127.5% U.S. import tariff.
Wait, really?
Yes, Waymo is taking a $39,000 base vehicle and turning it into an $89,000 chassis before they even install a single LiDAR sensor or compute node.
But why would Waymo willingly eat a massive 127% penalty on their hardware pipeline just to use these chassis? Is it a time-to-market play? Or is the hardware just that much better? Are there truly no domestic alternatives?
It comes down to the architecture of the glider itself. Waymo isn't buying finished cars. They're buying stripped chassis with deep unencrypted access to the vehicle's CAN bus, the power distribution networks, and the thermal management systems.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because retrofitting a standard consumer vehicle with a massive rooftop sensor pod and trunk-mounted supercomputers is incredibly inefficient.
Right.
So paying the tariff allows Waymo to deploy a purpose-built, easily integrated platform today, rather than waiting 3 to 5 years to co-develop a domestic alternative. Time to market is just trumping unit cost right now.
Wow. But it's interesting because Chinese automotive companies aren't content just being hardware suppliers for U.S. fleets.
No, definitely not.
They are expanding aggressively. Yannis Daga highlighted that companies like Pony.ai, Baidu, WeRide, and Momenta are treating the European market as their primary global deployment ground.
And that expansion is happening rapidly. Athena Browning noted that Baidu's Apollo Go is already actively testing its systems in London, running right alongside Waymo and Wave.
Really? London?
Yeah. And Christian Eckert pointed out a fascinating ecosystem play in Zagreb, where Uber and Pony.ai are scaling up operations in partnership with a local operator called Vern, so they're decoupling the stack. One company provides the autonomous tech, another provides the dispatch network, and a third manages the physical fleet operations and charging.
That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
But with that rapid influx of foreign-operated fleets into European cities, Marek Van Zura offered a highly critical, impartial perspective that kind of shifts the conversation away from vehicle safety.
Oh, the data privacy angle.
Exactly. He argues that while we debate vehicle safety, we are ignoring the reality that these vehicles are essentially 2-ton corporate-controlled surveillance drones.
It's a stark framing.
It is, but they are packed with high-resolution cameras, LiDAR, and radar, mapping public spaces continuously. And he points out that they're often sending data to Chinese entities.
Right. And it just highlights the immense data footprint of a robotaxi, which can generate, several terabytes of mapping and telemetry data per day, raising massive questions about data localization and municipal privacy. And just to be clear, we are neutrally reporting the concerns raised in the market here. But it perfectly illustrates why geopolitical scrutiny is just intensifying so much right now.
Definitely. And you can really contrast that rapid European expansion with the U.S. regulatory stance. Steve Greenfield noted that Nevada just heavily restricted Tesla's robotaxi permit application.
Oh, I saw this.
Yeah, Tesla requested a permit for 5,000 vehicles. State regulators granted them a maximum of 10.
Just 10.
Just 10 vehicles, capped at 45 miles per hour on a strict corridor along the Vegas Strip with heavy supervision requirements. I mean, regulators are officially slamming on the brakes.
It is a definitive signal that having advanced driver assistance software in consumer cars does not automatically grant you the regulatory permission to operate an unsupervised commercial fleet.
No, it's a completely different burden of proof.
Absolutely.
By the way, if you're finding this deep dive valuable, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future editions covering these market shifts.
Awesome. Well, we've spent a lot of time on 2-ton autonomous machines, but the exact same operational friction where silicon meets the street is playing out in the micromobility space too.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting. Because we're seeing a massive maturation in micromobility economics, but also rising friction on the streets. We finally have hard data answering that long-standing question of whether shared scooters and e-bikes can survive without endless venture capital.
Right.
Gunnar Fru shared some incredible financial data recently. The profitability question has basically been answered. Lime just posted $304 million in quarterly revenue with a massive 27.7% margin.
Wow.
Yeah. Pavoy is hitting record profits.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Dot is reportedly struggling significantly with debt.
You know, a 27% margin on heavily abused street-deployed hardware is an astonishing operational feat.
It really is.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the divergence in these companies proves that profitability in shared mobility is fundamentally an operations and logistics problem. It's not a demand problem.
No, the demand is proven. I mean, North American shared trips just hit a record 237 million.
Exactly. The operators who are surviving, like Lime, they figured out the granular mechanics of margin expansion.
Like what?
Well, they moved to swappable batteries, meaning the scooter stays on the street earning revenue, while a technician in a van only swaps the power cell.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they utilize predictive repositioning to ensure vehicles are at transit hubs right as trains arrive. The companies drowning in debt are the ones who just dumped hardware onto sidewalks and hoped utilization would magically outpace depreciation.
Yeah, you can't just hope for the best. But managing 237 million trips brings an enormous amount of friction regarding safety and user behavior. Mark Williams shared data showing that emergency room visits for e-bike and scooter injuries have skyrocketed from under 1,000 back in 2017 to tens of thousands today.
And while part of that is just a function of scale, a researcher named Calvin Thigpen identified a structural root cause in the business model itself. Yeah. He found that the pay-per-minute pricing model, PAYG, actively incentivizes unsafe riding behavior.
That makes total sense. I mean, it's exactly like watching a ticking taxi meter. You are financially motivated to sprint through a yellow light or cut a corner just to save a few cents.
Thigpen's simulator studies proved exactly that. Riders on a pay-per-minute model will ride at higher average speeds and accept significantly more dangerous gaps in cross-traffic than riders on privately owned bikes or subscription models.
Wow.
Yeah, the revenue structure of the industry is actively generating risk on the street.
And municipalities are responding to that risk with brute force. Colleen Heffernan noted that Toronto police just launched a massive enforcement campaign targeting illegal sidewalk riding after the city logged over 500 collisions this year.
Good grief.
But she correctly points out that enforcement only treats the symptoms of a regulatory patchwork and an infrastructure mismatch. I mean, our street infrastructure simply wasn't built for a vehicle that goes 20 miles per hour.
No, you cannot enforce your way out of a built environment mismatch.
Exactly. Which brings us to the legislative nightmare in New York City. Dan Sarasi analyzed the situation, pointing out that NYC currently has 17 different bills on the table trying to regulate e-bike safety.
17?
17. But his core argument is that subjective enforcement is impossible. You can't expect a patrol officer to conduct a split-second audit of a vehicle's motor wattage as it just zooms past them in a bike lane.
So what is his proposed mechanism for objective enforcement then?
It requires physical, visual classification. Sarasi argues for treating Class 1 pedal assist e-bikes exactly like traditional bicycles, capping the motor assist at 20 miles per hour and fully legalizing them in bike lanes.
Okay.
Then, the city needs to mandate distinct visual classes for low-speed throttle vehicles.
Wow.
And most importantly, they must aggressively reclassify those high-speed e-motos, the ones weighing like 150 pounds and hitting 40 miles per hour, as the mopeds they actually are.
Right.
Requiring registration and keeping them entirely out of the protected micromobility lanes.
It's all about aligning the physical momentum and kinetic energy of the vehicle with the correct infrastructure.
Yes.
And Thomas Broughton brought up a similar point regarding parking infrastructure. Currently, most micromobility parking relies on GPS geofencing.
Which is always so messy.
It is! In dense urban canyons, GPS multipath errors cause the location data to drift. So you end up with scooters digitally registering as parked properly, while physically they are blocking a wheelchair ramp.
The software thinks it's compliant, but the physical reality is literally a tripping hazard.
Precisely. Broughton argues the industry must transition to physical infrastructure like Spark Park stations that mechanically verify the vehicle is locked in the correct orientation before the user's trip can even end.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it just removes the guesswork from the algorithms completely.
And aligning these physical vehicles with the built environment kind of brings us to our final theme, the ultimate user. Whether it's a robotaxi or an e-bike, the ultimate success of mobility relies on serving human needs, not just flexing technology.
Yeah.
Shaylin James Anto introduced this concept called the passenger-defined vehicle.
Okay, I like that.
For 140 years, automotive design was constrained by the absolute physical requirements of a human driver. You needed forward-facing seats, a dashboard, a steering column, pedals, all of it.
But the moment you remove the driver, you remove the control center.
Right.
You can suddenly design the vehicle's interior volume from the passenger outward. The HVAC, the sightlines, the seating configurations, it all fundamentally changes when the vehicle becomes a rolling lounge or a mobile workspace rather than just a driver's cockpit.
And Senator Phillips expanded on this beautifully in her TED Talk Insights, challenging the industry's focus on affluent, able-bodied urbanites. She argues that the real question of mobility access isn't about luxury. It's about closing the transport poverty gap.
Right.
She asked this room full of auto executives, would you let your daughter take the bus at an unsafe stop at 10 p.m.? Can your elderly parent who can no longer see well enough to drive still maintain their independence and social connections?
And when you reframe autonomous mobility around access rather than just autonomy for its own sake, the operational priorities completely change.
How so?
Well, Jay Shen noted that Europe is facing a rapidly aging demographic, right? Nearly 1 in 3 people will soon be over 65. In that context, accessibility features like kneeling suspensions or advanced voice interfaces for visually impaired passengers, they become a core operational requirement for fleet survival, not just a niche side service.
Right. It's essential. And we are seeing this demographic shift impact deployment strategies everywhere. Adam Bolkar argued that autonomous shuttles represent the ultimate bridge for rural communities.
How interesting.
Yeah, everyone focuses on dense urban cores because the utilization rates are higher, but rural populations are increasingly isolated from healthcare and jobs. The operational design domain of a fixed rural route might actually be simpler to solve than a chaotic city center, and the socioeconomic impact would be life-changing.
Absolutely. And this human-centric approach, it must extend to the infrastructure supporting the transition too.
What do you mean?
Well, Hubern Grunwald pointed out a glaring flaw in our EV infrastructure rollout. In Olympia, Washington, half the residents are renters.
Okay.
If the industry only subsidizes level 2 EV charging infrastructure for homeowners with private garages, the entire electrification transition fails. It leaves half the population behind, purely based on their roasing status.
Wow. Yeah, that is a massive oversight. So what does this all mean? We are entering an era where the vehicle is no longer defined by the driver, but by the network, the passenger, and the city infrastructure. If we truly optimize cities around shared fleets and passenger experiences rather than drivers, we have to wonder what happens to a century-old culture built entirely on the personal joy of driving and individual car ownership. Something to think about.
It is a massive cultural and architectural pivot. We are rewiring not just the drivetrains of our vehicles, but how our cities are structured and who gets to participate in them.
If you enjoyed this episode, new episodes drop every 2 weeks. Also, check out our other editions on charging and battery tech, commercial fleets, and SDV and AI defined. Thanks so much for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe.